So, if you're here, then the chances are you've all heard of Skinwalker Ranch, right? We know about the strange goings on there that dates back decades. I mean, we're talking crazy UFO activity, weird equipment malfunctions, not to mention documented incidents of paranormal activity, cryptids and strange portals. A lot of people believe that there's some kind of interdimensional gateway there, and that these UAPs and all the strange happenings, well, that's all down to a thin veil between realities. Or maybe these crafts are interdimensional in nature. It's a common belief amongst the investigators that the real secrets lie underneath the ranch itself. If by some miracle you're completely unfamiliar with Skinwalker Ranch, then you're in luck, because yours truly here has already done the legwork for you and made a 3-part series right here on this channel, if you can believe that. Links in the description below. If you have been following the trend, and maybe even the TV show that covers all this, it always seems that whenever the team conduct any form of excavation on the ranch, that it sparks an increase in high strangeness. So now imagine if they just said F it and dug a huge trench in the ground, large enough for the entire team to get right under there and see what's really going on. Now imagine that there is another place on the planet that is very similar to Skinwalker Ranch, and in many ways it's way more insane. And now imagine if a military force decided, we're not messing around with this one, and initiated a massive operation to investigate under the earth. Well, that's exactly what happened. Hi folks, I'm Johnny and welcome to The Oddest. This case has it all. UFOs, shadow people, ghosts, government cover-ups and psychic mediums. Get ready to have your minds blown. Let's go. The conclusion of the Cold War in 1989 brought a surge of excitement among UFO investigators worldwide. The opening up of Eastern Europe facilitated the exchange of sighting reports between counterparts who were previously restricted due to the Iron Curtain. They were now able to share information freely, with Bulgaria being one such country. Having been largely closed off from the West due to its association with the Soviet Union since the end of World War II, Bulgaria underwent a significant transformation in the late 1980s, transitioning from communist rule to a more democratic system with multi-party elections. Amidst this period of change, the Bulgarian military embarked on an intriguing operation near the village of Tsarichina in western Bulgaria, known as Operation Sunray. This operation, shrouded in secrecy from December 6, 1990 to November 19, 1992, has continued to spark debates and fuel conspiracy theories. Out on the fringes of a quaint little village in Eastern Europe, a lingering encounter from over 3 decades ago continues to haunt the servicemen and women who were entangled in its web. What perplexes them to this very day is why the Bulgarian army devoted 2 whole years to excavating the foothills of the Balkan mountains, only to then bury every trace of their endeavours. The young soldier was thrown clean across the room, cracking his head against the polished stone wall. For a fleeting moment he lay motionless on the ground. Then he remembered hearing a voice scream, "Open fire!" The once silent space erupted with the sharp cracks of gunfire. The colonel, who was in charge of this operation, observed his men unloading hundreds of rounds into a hazy barrier now enveloping the centre of the room, concealing whatever lay buried in the wall opposite them. Bullets entered the shimmering field only to freeze mid-air before harmlessly dropping to the ground. Amidst this chaos, a rifleman continued firing, but another comrade was hurled across the room like a rag doll right in front of him, struck by an invisible force. Stray rounds from his weapon hit at least 2 other soldiers, taking them out of commission. The moments of silence and gasping breath being shattered by the sound of soldiers screaming in agony as their squad mates reloaded to continue the volley of gunfire at this object. In the midst of the mayhem, the commanding officer, a Colonel Kanev, decided it was time to call for a retreat. He made sure to get the wounded officers' help first, as they all lumbered their way back to the surface from the cave, through a series of tunnels and corridors that were never built to be used by humans. As the colonel was helping one of his team up to his feet, he slung the man's arm around his neck, using the wall of the cave to steady himself. It was right then that he became aware of a vibrating sensation. first his fingertips, then up through his legs. A green light slowly started to form. He would later say that it seemed like the floor of the passageway itself began to glow. All the while this was going on, the Colonel gritted his teeth as he could hear the female consultant that had accompanied the team down into the cave shouting about how she warned them and that they should never have meddled with what they don't understand. It was when she finally shouted that they were all going to die down there that the Colonel had had enough. He whipped around and through a grimace barked at this woman to shut her face and get moving. If she was going to die down there, well, it would be him that would put a bullet in her. He promptly ordered 2 riflemen to escort her away, leaving the eerie thrumming sensation and the intensifying green light behind them. Colonel Kanev couldn't afford to dwell on the pleading expressions of the 2 soldiers, as he sternly ordered them to act as the rear guard, reminding them of their solemn oath to protect the Bulgarian people. The main party had only moved a short distance when they heard more gunfire echoing up the tunnel behind them. Abruptly silenced, the air grew cooler and the daylight illuminated the path ahead. Staggering out into the open, orderlies and medics rushed forward to assist the group. As the medical team were tending to the wounded, the Colonel rallied up the small team of engineers and gave them explicit instructions. Seal the tunnels using their large excavators. Now, normally when Colonel Kanev barks, people hop to it, but they just looked at him blankly, one of them stepping forward and explaining a situation that these seasoned experts couldn't even understand. See, every piece of excavating equipment, the diggers, the drills, heck, even the massive tanks that were guarding this site, well, they all wouldn't even turn on. Ultimately, it didn't matter. The Colonel ordered his men to set explosive charges to seal these tunnels. At this point, the woman that the Colonel was compelled to bring along on this operation was still shouting rubbish. See, she was a psychic medium that was there for a very specific reason. She was the one that had guided the military to this location, but we'll come back to her later on. Meanwhile, the psychic continued shouting and screaming that they were all doomed to die, cursing Colonel Kanev for disregarding her advice and that of Baba Vanga. The Colonel was tempted to silence her with a bullet, but instead he opted to motion for an orderly to sedate her, a problem to be dealt with later. Minutes later, explosive charges detonated, burying the bodies of the fallen soldiers and whatever had killed them. Looking back at the history of Bulgaria, it's fairly obvious that the country is no stranger to conflict. From the Thracian tribes uniting to establish their nation, the Bulgarian people have endured a perpetual cycle of invasion and uprising. Whether facing Persians, Romans, Ottomans, or the Soviet Union, a relentless succession of empires has sought to take over this territory, only for its inhabitants to reclaim independence through periods of brutal and bloody struggle. That brings us to the tiny wee village of Tsarichina, which lies roughly 20 odd miles northwest of the Bulgarian capital Sofia. 3 decades ago, even the Bulgarians never knew much about this place, never mind the rest of the world. It was remote, small, and never had reason to be in the public spotlight. However, on December 6th, 1990, the tranquility of this tiny village was disrupted when a sizable military force descended upon it, cordoning off a significant portion of farmland. This marked the initiation of Operation Sunray, a project spearheaded by Colonel Svetko Kanev. The Bulgarian Ministry of Defence publicly stated that the primary goal of this endeavour was to unearth a long-believed buried treasure. The rumours circulating in the region suggested that the Bulgarian Emperor Samuel had buried a substantial cache of gold near to that village. See, they were about to go to war with the Ottoman Empire, and Big Samuel, well, he didn't fancy his gold getting pinched. Colonel Kanev was tasked with this mission of locating and recovering this lost fortune. Once the site was secured, Colonel Kanev directed his men to commence digging a deep shaft into the earth, marking the beginning of their excavation efforts. However, the operation faced challenges from the very start. In addition to the potential threat of flooding from a nearby underground lake, the soldiers encountered another issue. See, all the electrical equipment that they had brought along began to malfunction. Huge excavators, power tools, they all refused to operate. So they had no choice and had to resort to manual tools like shovels and pickaxes. Around 6 metres below the surface, the workers stumbled upon a formidable layer of stone that proved resistant to any hand tools. Eventually, explosives were employed to break through this barrier, unveiling a mysterious spiral passageway winding its way deep underground. As the first squads of soldiers cautiously ventured into these tunnels, the excavation site was suddenly engulfed in unexplained and strange phenomena. Right off the bat, some of the infantrymen keeping watch over the compound started reporting sightings of strange figures and creatures just beyond the perimeter fence. Witnesses tossed around descriptions ranging from 7-foot-tall monsters to tiny beings hiding in the undergrowth. Adding to the oddities, the site's vehicles and machinery began failing, and the radio equipment malfunctioned, making it impossible for them to communicate or request help. To make things work, they had to resort to laying a telephone landline from the nearby village to the command post. But here's the funny thing. Operators using it complained about hearing weird whispering voices in the background of their calls. As time ticked on, military personnel dared to venture deeper into the winding corridors of the excavation site. Meanwhile, above ground, the soldiers stationed at sentry points were having their own problems as the first of many strange craft appeared. Now, everyone had their own take on what these craft actually looked like, but the common thread was that they all appeared brightly illuminated and seemingly trailing flames across the night sky. Let's fast forward a wee bit to June 1992 when a local resident, Elka Kirova, got an unexpected wake-up call from her dogs going berserk and barking outside of her house. When she peeked out the curtains, she caught sight of 3 shadow figures scurrying across the land from the excavation site. They vanished into a nearby tree line, and as they done so, a brilliant white light lit up the entire wooded area for a brief moment and then shot up into the sky. Kirova promptly reported this strange occurrence to Colonel Kanev. His team investigated and found a circular patch of scorched earth exactly where she claimed to have seen this mysterious object. Here's the twist though. In the days following this encounter, both Kirova and the soldiers who checked out her report, well, they experienced an overwhelming sense of fatigue, which basically confined them to their beds. On the evening of November 27th in 1991, Graicho Kolev, a villager, was nearing his home when an unexpected occurrence unfolded. He found himself bathed in a radiant light beaming down from the sky. The next thing he knew, he blacked out, and upon waking the next morning, well, he couldn't even recall the past few hours. What made it even stranger was that he found himself in the village of Meshtitsa. That's a good 40 miles south of where he actually lived. Now, fast forward 2 years into the exploration of the tunnels beneath Tsarichina. The team hit a roadblock. See, they found themselves in this massive cave opening, but they couldn't go any further. This was because directly ahead of them was what looked like a huge translucent slab of polished stone. It was like ice, only not. Upon breaking through, they entered a circular chamber with walls polished to a mirror-like sheen. At the far end of this chamber, the skeletal remains of a towering creature seemed to be fused into the rock. Colonel Kanev personally witnessed his men navigate this chamber, noticing peculiar symbols resembling hieroglyphs beneath the stone's surface. Oh, I'm getting Predator vibes. As the soldiers reached the centre, an invisible barrier prevented further progress, resulting in severe injuries to some of them. Whatever unfolded afterwards prompted the army to swiftly withdraw from the tunnel network completely, destroying the entry point and then concreting over the entire site. All records of this operation were concealed from public access. The entire venture, estimated to cost over $20 million for the Bulgarian government, left behind a legacy of confusion and despair. With official records kept under wraps, commentators had to piece together the narrative from the accounts of the surviving members. Colonel Kanev, in an interview, admitted that the tale of Emperor Samuel's lost treasure was always just a cover story. Yeah, no shit. In reality, he and his men were guided to the location by a group of psychics and remote viewers, describing something buried just beneath the surface, designated by the military as Object Number 1. He continued to share how some of his men had tragically lost their lives due to exposure to a mysterious bacterium. Others had experienced something inexplicable, teleportation around the site. with their lifeless bodies later being discovered fused within the rock itself. A remote viewer, Eli Loganova, who had been part of this project, spent years pushing for another expedition to this location. She believed that the entity within the buried object was one of humanity's oldest ancestors, attempting to guide people to its location for thousands of years. Loganova had also said that Hitler during World War II had fruitlessly searched for this entity, invading Russia in the hopes of getting closer to finding it. According to her, the creature had shown her visions of the future. She documented all of this in 4 complete journals, which were later confiscated by the Bulgarian army. These journals detailed vessels travelling through space by harnessing the power of the sun, and soldiers wearing bullet-repelling clothing. Adding to the mix, military professor Delcho Neplatonov shared insights. See, his daughter Marina, well, she was attached to the expedition due to her latent psychic abilities. She had been warned by the renowned seer Baba Vanga not to disturb whatever dwelled beneath Tsarichina. Baba Vanga was a famous Bulgarian seer and renowned psychic. She predicted a shit ton of stuff, including the death of Princess Diana, the 9/11 attacks on New York, and the 44th American president being African American. The messed up thing though about all this is she died back in 1996. But you know what? All that is a topic for another video. Professor Neplatonov elaborated on Marina's involvement a little bit, describing how she closely collaborated with Colonel Kanev throughout this entire project. However, upon her return, Marina was noticeably changed and she tragically chose to end her own life by leaping from a tall building. After the closure of the site at Tsarichina, a team from the University of Sofia set up camp near the town, aiming to conduct scientific tests to uncover what the army had actually been seeking and why they invested heavily on this expedition. Over 20 days they scanned for anomalies, such as variations in the electromagnetic radiation. During the first week, they recorded multiple UFO sightings and even experienced an eerie incident where their equipment was manipulated by an invisible poltergeist-like entity. Yeah, their stuff would be invisibly thrown around. However, the turning point for these guys was when an unknown craft flew low over their campsite, projecting a beam of light onto their campfire, causing it to blaze out of control. Faced with these bizarre occurrences, they decided to make like a tree and get out of there.
It's leave, you idiot. Make like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong. All right then.
What lies hidden beneath the rock and stone of the Bulgarian landscape? What force reached out to these military psychics, directing them to bring soldiers and engineers to this dormant site? According to Eli Loganova, it's a creature predating mankind, a towering entity with vast psychic powers, aiming to manipulate humanity into freeing it from its subterranean prison. Maybe it's buried there for a reason. Ever think that? On the other hand, some speculate that the army stumbled upon a downed spacecraft, activating a distress signal that brought forth extraterrestrial assistance. Given this theory, Tsarichina has earned its reputation as Bulgaria's version of Area 51. Adding to the intrigue is the wide variance in reported shapes and sizes of entities and flying craft observed by witnesses. This leads to a more intriguing hypothesis: Tsarichina as an interdimensional portal, where the edges of our existence collide with neighbouring realities. This would allow inhabitants from those realms to enter and freely roam among us. Skinwalker Ranch in Utah is a notorious example of such a crossover site, featuring mysterious beings, giant creatures and alien spacecraft. Other locations like the US Air Force facility at Montauk in Long Island, well, that's also cited as a potential example. However, a more rational explanation may also be considered. See, over the 2-year lifespan of this clandestine operation, it's without a doubt that many military personnel would have come and gone, having been posted there for the duration or just for a short time. So it's not a shot in the dark to assume that psychology played a part here. Maybe campfire tales and ghost stories circulated about what was really going on there, meaning that these folks suddenly finding themselves getting sent to the Bulgarian Area 51, well, they would already have a preconceived notion as to what to expect. Every equipment glitch suddenly got attributed to a mysterious and malevolent force, while any curious trespasser near the base perimeter was eyed with suspicion, suspected to be a marauding cryptid or an alien visitor. Maybe it was just Jack walking his dog. Despite reported incidents and a plethora of alleged witnesses, it's crucial to highlight the absence of photographic or video evidence capturing what actually happened. I mean, this all happened in the 1990s, so where's all the documented evidence? So this means one of two things. Either the supposed events at Tsarichina were nothing more than the overactive imaginations of all those involved, or the governments were just quick to cover up the entire ordeal. Operation Sunray remains concealed, both physically and figuratively, shrouded in a veil of secrecy. This duality has led to two outcomes. Firstly, the truth of what occurred may forever be a mystery to us. Secondly, the mystery is deeply ingrained in the consciousness of both the Bulgarian people and the scientific community at large. Whether it was a naive request for buried treasure, or a misguided attempt to engage with a powerful and mysterious entity, the operation was a failure. However, the rumours and stories spawned from it, be they born out of paranoia or intentional deception, well, that ensures that the legend of Tsarichina is one that can never truly fade away. Whew. Right, that was a crazy one. Thanks for joining me yet again, folks. It's tea time for Johnny, so listen, you stay safe out there, tell someone that you love them, and remember, no matter what, keep smiling.